Okay, so we're going to call the meeting to order. First item is MAC member introductions.
Elisa Adriani,
Andrew Lange, David Stepner,
Stacia Lange,
Mark Calhoun. Thank you. The next item is the approval of the agenda for tonight. Are there any suggestions for changing the agenda? Can I then have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
I second.
All in favor? All in favor? Aye. The agenda is approved. Next is approval of the August 4th MAC meeting minutes. Anybody have any changes to that?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve, second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Project. All right, the next item on the agenda is comments. Anybody wants to make a comment about something that is not on the agenda for tonight? 3 minutes. Always come to the lectern, introduce yourself. Anybody? And the next item is community reports. The next item is community reports. If there are any community organizations that want to talk to the community and the MAC, please come forward now. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Mike Geary. I'm the general manager of the Olympic Valley Public Service District. And just going to give you a quick update on some of the projects and things we're working on these days. Biggest project we have on our hands right now is our West Tank Recode project. That is a 1.1 million gallon tank up here on the South Ridge, right above the ropes course. We are currently, it's 2 days after Labor Day. So we're draining the 1.1 million gallon tank right now, at the same time that we're disinfecting some smaller temporary tanks to provide water to the community while we drain the big tank and recoat the inside. We'll be doing some structural repairs where we found some corrosion with our water tank inspections. We are in the midst of our defensible space inspection season. So those here in the Valley may have seen our fire department over the last couple of weeks, and can expect to see them again if a second inspection is required. We encourage people to get rid of their burnable yard waste and bring it to a green waste day. We have 2 more left this season. The next one is on Sunday, this coming Sunday. It's Lot 4. Big thank you to Andrew Lange for helping us out with those green waste days. Thank you. We're scheduled to close our community dumpster facility. We expect the dumpsters to be taken away on next Monday, on September 12th. The board voted unanimously to close the site due to years of persistent abuse and a spike in costs for this year. The Public Service District currently has an opening on its board of directors. The board will be considering applicants. Applications are due October 19th, and that'll be for the board's consideration at a special meeting on October 25th. It's the last Monday of it's the Monday before our October board meeting. I don't have a calendar in front of me. And lastly, members of the community can expect a invitation to a public meeting to discuss our community wildfire protection plan, which we expect to have completed sometime in October. And that's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? So I'll actually say two things. One, for the Olympic Valley Design Review Committee, which met last Thursday. And AT&T presented a plan to replace basically a telephone pole out by the power station out in the by 7-Eleven. The power pole was a antenna, wireless antenna years ago. All the antennas have been taken off of it. They're going to replace that pole by a 72-foot fake tree. As you see when you drive down 80 up on the ridges. So we did approve it. It will be seen from the road, depending on exactly where you are. But on the other hand, it will dramatically improve the AT&T service down the east end of the valley. So we weighed the pros and cons and approved that. So you should be seeing work on that pretty soon. That was number one. And number two, the Forest Service held a meeting here on Friday, presenting a plan to work on thinning the forest, mostly in the Alpine Meadow side, but in reaching over to the Squaw Valley side as well. In order to go after a grant to thin the forest, they have to do a NEPA study. The NEPA study proposal they got is for about $480,000, something like that. And from a grant from TTCF, they're going to meet about 2/3 of that. So they are going to be coming to the communities, both the Firewise districts as well as the HOAs, to try to raise the money to fill that gap locally. The Olympic Valley Firewise Committee is donating $10,000 toward that effort. But if you look at the big picture, the Five Creeks project that'll be going from Squaw Valley boundary up to the Mouse Hole, then the award that the fire department here got about $500,000 to work on the North Ridge, and then combine this with the project that they want to do, which is on the South Ridge of Alpine Meadows. 5 years from now, this will be a dramatically different looking area, although there'll still be a lot of work to be done. So people who are interested in contributing to that effort, you'll be notified pretty soon, but I think it's a very worthy cause. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Olympic Valley MAC member reports. Are there any? Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is supervisor and district director reports.
Well, I don't know that my district directors have any reports, nor do they want to speak tonight, but I will. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cindy Gustafson, Placer County Supervisor for this area. And I'll try to make my report pretty brief because I know that isn't why the audience is here tonight. But I wanted to go over a few items, and maybe you can get that up on the screen. Greg in the back is going to magically give me a screen, right? Here it comes. It's worth the wait, I promise. There. And you can go to the next one. Is it this? Yeah. Okay. We'll go to the next slide. Of course, it doesn't work. Ah, there you go. You've got the magic touch. So a few items I thought the public and the MAC would be interested in. First, the North Tahoe Truckee Biomass Task Force. The Board of Supervisors unanimously approved this participation in this regional effort with the town of Truckee and Nevada County to again look at the biomass plant at the Eastern Regional Landfill. Obviously, when that project was approved and went through the environmental review process, we never went to construction, and this is prior to my time on the Board of Supervisors. But a lot of that was we were relying on the thought that it had to pay for itself through energy sales. Well, what's changed since then has been the volume and amount of product we need to take out of our forest, and we are hauling very long distances and obviously have overcapacity at many of the existing facilities. So right now, we're spending more money taking things off the hill than dealing with them here. And it's taking efforts away from the Forest Service and our local fire districts getting our fuels reduced in our forests. So we've entered into this agreement. The Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation is also a partner in this agreement and will be looking at the amount of materials that we can supply here locally and looking at a sorting facility at Eastern Regional Landfill and then also with the biomass plant. I think it's about a 2-megawatt plant. It's not very large to feed the infrastructure that we have for power, but certainly we're reducing costs in getting that fuel and treating it up here and sorting it here. There are a number of pilot programs being talked about both at North Star with our airport district and also with, I believe, the hospital district at using the fuel for biomass that would take the biomass, use it for a creation of hydronic heating in certain facilities. So it makes sense in large buildings and large villages, so we don't necessarily need to convert it to just a power. So great effort. We're really pleased. All the partners came together and our public works staff has just done an incredible job moving that project forward for us since we started talking about it. Next project is the Tahoe One Big Bin program. Doesn't affect the valley right now, but it could if you want to participate. You're under a bit different franchise agreement than the lakeside districts, but we're going to a one big bin and asking people to put everything in the bin. We'll take care of pulling out the recyclables at the Eastern Regional Landfill. MRF, I'm sorry, not landfill anymore. And the reason for that is we're more efficient. And when we did studies of people using blue bags and sorting it themselves, they often made errors in what they threw in the garbage and also what they put in recycling. And we were going back through it. So this will be a more efficient way to deal with the volume of trash that we're having. We've also contracted with Clean Tahoe to do more trash pickups in our region and contribute funding that way. And those are being funded, that's being funded out of transient occupancy tax funds. Library services, our property tax revenues, no surprise to any of us who've been watching the market around here, have gone up. And with that, our revenues for our libraries. So we're increasing hours at both the Tahoe City and Kings Beach libraries by about 10.5 hours to keep more of the money serving the community that's producing that revenue. So I'm thankful to our library services staff and our CEO staff that have put that into place. We will be coming back with more discussion on library services in this region. If you've heard me talk before, I've been very interested in this partnership with the town of Truckee and Nevada County. They're looking at a larger library in the Truckee area and how we work together to backfill each other's staff and support each other, because typically when somebody's staff member's ill or out, they're not sending somebody from Auburn up here to cover that shift, so we close the library. If we can work with our partners up here on the mountain, obviously we can backfill that and have support to keep the libraries open and provide better services for our community. So we're looking at that, exploring that with the town of Truckee and Nevada County again. So more regional service. Dollar Creek Crossing is the affordable housing project on Dollar Hill. Many of you have heard about this in the past. We took a bit of a pause on this and the county took back over the project for the last about 1.5 years with some redesign and rethinking on how that project might move forward. What we heard loud and clear from the community is pure affordable is probably not going to work on that site, both from community concern, but also from demand. Many of our people make too much money to qualify for true affordable housing. So looking at a mixture of for sale units as well as for rent units and some there. So that project will be coming back, the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday of this coming week. We will be hearing and approving an agreement to go to the next phase of design and environmental review on that project, and looking to potentially have final approval sometime in 2023 on that project. Placer County CEO, along with everything else we've been dealing with, we did have a transition at our county CEO level. The closing period, if you're interested in the job, any of you, September 11th, this end of this week, I think on Sunday is the closing deadline for applications for that. We do hope to have a new CEO. We have some internal candidates as well as external candidates, and hope to have a new CEO in place by the end of the year. And similarly on TRPA, which I get to serve on TRPA governing board as well, Joanne Marquetta retired, and so we're in a search for a new executive director for the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Again, that period, that also closes September 11th. Everybody wanted to do it right after Labor Day, and make sure that we get as wide a field of applicants as possible. And then finally, on Martis Valley Trail, we opened that trail, did our ribbon cutting, although it was already a bit open and being used, on August 16th when Congressman McClintock and the Army Corps of Engineers were here already for the federal summit. It's a 4.6 mile section that again is just an incredible collaboration, because it took Placer County, North Star Community Services District, the Army Corps of Engineers, our congressional delegation, our U.S. Senator Feinstein helped us quite a bit, and obviously the Washoe tribe as well. So there were a lot of cultural issues there that we were in going across the valley we needed to deal with, and I'm really proud of the project, the staff here, our DPW staff who worked on that, as well as all the partner agencies, and especially Mike Stoudemire, who just had such a vision and fought for that project all these years. The next phases will bring it over into the basin. So that phase goes from Truckee up to the North Star parking lot, right there at the roundabout as you go into North Star. And the next phase will go from North Star up over and meet in Kings Beach. So quite a monumental task to get it over there, but we'll start to complete those. And then our upcoming events and meetings, obviously we are here tonight with the Olympic Valley MAC. Tomorrow night, same room, same time, same topics. We'll have the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council meeting here. I mentioned the Board of Supervisors, our regular meeting, September 13th. 27th is our next regular meeting. The Planning Commission will be up on September 22nd. Their focus on that workshop is going to be the Tahoe Basin Area Plan, I believe. Is that, I think that's correct, to do a workshop on the area plan. But certainly, if you're interested in meeting our planning commissioners, they will be, I believe, at the Event Center in Kings Beach on September 22nd. And then the Board of Supervisors, the rest of the board will be up here with me on maybe on the 24th and 25th, or maybe just the 25th of October. And there'll be meetings posted. I'm not sure of those locations yet. I think they were trying for the resort at Squaw Creek on the 25th, but I'm not sure that's finalized. So those are the upcoming, and then how to reach us and how to sign up for our newsletters. We all try really hard to keep those newsletters up to date, but so much is happening so quickly. Sometimes we fall behind and forgetting to tell you something important to the community. So feel free to reach out and email us, ask for questions or updates. I will give you a quick update on the fire. I was down in Forest Hill this morning. It started at the Oxbow Reservoir, for those of you who know that area. And was very small in a very steep part of the canyon, very hard to get to. Thunder cell came over at about 10:30 last night. The downwinds from that is what spread it up across the river and started up the hill. By this morning, I think it was about 500 or 600 acres when I first got my first alert this morning. And now it's about 4,300 acres. So it's growing pretty rapidly. You're seeing the ash and obviously the air quality here. But they did order evacuation from Michigan Bluff early. And in fact, some last night and then early this morning, and then Forest Hill, parts of Forest Hill down to Todd Valley have been evacuated today during the day. So keep our fingers crossed for all those folks, keep them in our thoughts. They know they're in a real high risk area. And again, that's a one way in, one way out area, much larger than ours and very prone to wildfire danger on that ridge line. So they've been very concerned about that for a long time and working hard on their defensible space and protection. So that's it, David. That's all I have.
Thanks. Any questions for Cindy on anything she's talked about?
And I'll be around. I'll be around if you want to catch me later
Andrew.
too. Yes, Andrew.
What about the library itself in Tahoe City?
Yeah, there is a proposal from the new owners of the mall to look at a redevelopment of that site. And during those discussions, we've been talking because that library is not very visible. And so we've been reserving a couple other sites. You know that the county acquired the Bechtold building right at the entrance of Tahoe City, the old Plumas Bank building. And so we've been reserving that as a potential relocation spot. We've also been looking at potentially at Dollar Creek housing with that project. There's space for a community serving building. And there's been a thought about that if the development moves forward and if we choose to move the library. So there's a lot of choices there, but we have options that we're holding on to make sure we can come up with a more visible, accessible space than what's there now.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the information item, which is the Palisades at Tahoe specific plan. So main topic of discussion tonight. Again, it's an informational item. There are no votes or anything like that. The purpose of this discussion is for everybody here to hear what is being said and ask questions. We would appreciate everybody holding their questions until the two presenters have had a chance to finish. And then I'll go through some rules on how we're going to handle the questions. But during the presentation, don't raise your hand or interrupt or anything. Let the people finish. And then we'll go into the questions. So I'm not quite sure who's first.
Well, actually, I was going to lead off a bit.
Oh, go ahead.
And the reason I'm going to lead off is I'm going to ask the public, how many of you were here last time when this project went through and participated in public meetings? Great, welcome back. And how many of us are new and didn't participate in any of those meetings? Okay, point made that we have a lot of new faces and a lot of people here to learn about the project who may not know some of the background that some of you know probably definitely better than I know. And we also have two other county supervisors that are new, and potentially by the time this project moves forward, we'll have been through the November election and have a fourth new supervisor. So a lot has changed and a lot has stayed the same. And I think, I'm urging everyone to be open and listen to each other, listen to the project. I know I have questions. There are no dumb questions, right? That's what I always told my kids. So hopefully you'll be patient with the supervisor too. And so with that, I wanted to introduce another new face who is our CEDRA director, David Kwong, who has just joined the county. David has a long background, and I can let you introduce yourself. I don't remember your whole bio, but Elk Grove, Sacramento County.
About 6 places.
Yeah, about 6 other places. So great experience. We are so happy he's joined our team, and he's going to start off the presentation, David. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor, and good evening, MAC members. David Kwongan, and I am the new CEDRA agency director. What I like to do is also be very transparent with you folks in the audience here in terms of resetting our tone with the MAC here and with the community. So we brought today two of the key core staff members, Alex Fish, who was and is still the planner on the project. He's a supervising planner with the county. And then we also have Patrick Dobbs, who is a senior planner with the county. And I think online as well, we have County Council Clayton Cook, who's again online, and hopefully to be able to answer any questions and be also part of our presentation. What we're going to do is go through a PowerPoint. This is for us, for myself, truly, to listen to you folks, to listen to the community and hear what your thoughts are, if they're still the same concerns, and anything else in terms of kind of concerns that you really have for us. So I really, just a little background on me, and I'll go into it. I'm more of a Sacramento person. That's kind of my basis. And I've been in the planning, development, and community field for a little bit over 32 years now. So from one of the biggest aspects for me in terms of that career and experience is listening to the community and you folks and see how the projects come out. So just kind of keep an open mind if you can. I will keep an open mind, and we are here to listen. And then with that, I'd like to, at this point, with MAC members' permission, I'm going to defer to Alex to go through a little PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Greg, are you able to get that PowerPoint up? While Greg is doing that, I'll just take a quick moment to let you all know what to expect so that you can follow along. This is going to be a very brief presentation, as David indicated. The purpose coming here tonight is just to kind of provide a platform to initiate a discussion. We're here to listen and to answer questions. So I'll go through just a very brief PowerPoint presentation that'll look at the prior entitlement review process, outline briefly the prior public decision-making process, and what those planning commission and board actions were. Then I'm going to turn it over to our counsel, Clayton Cook, for a brief overview of the trial court and appellate court decisions, and then let you folks know where we are currently in the process and what the process will look like moving forward. So with that, I did want to, just a quick note here. This is a scan of a picture that has been in my office for the last, I think, about 7 years. And I was pretty certain that the person that gave it to me was not on the MAC anymore, but might be here tonight. But at any rate, I couldn't remember her name, but just to kind of let you folks know, she gave me this picture and another picture, and she said, I want you to have this and do what you will with it, but I want you to understand for this valley, this is what is at stake for us, right? And so I want you to have a clear understanding of what this project means. And I really appreciated those remarks and the message that it conveyed. So I just wanted to open up with that. And I'll see if I can get this to advance now. We all know where this is, obviously. This is from the Polson's, Olympic Valley Road near Polson's place. There we go. Well, apparently I went too far. Nope. Greg, am I in control or you? Okay. Okay. Okay, great. So obviously, this is we're in the right on the edge of the project area here in this building. This is the 85-acre, what's referred to as the main village area that makes up part of the resort base, takes in a little bit of the adjoining valley over here. And then about 1 mile or a little bit over 1 mile to the east here is what was referred to as the east parcel. It's about 8.8 acres. The main project area, obviously, this is, existing base area that had been initially developed in the late 40s and then kind of took off with the 1960 Winter Olympics. And I think you folks know the rest. This parcel is directly across from the Public Service District offices. I think this is probably the fire station bay right across the street here. This is just a graphic of the existing land use setting. This graphic comes out of the specific plan, but its basis is in the adopted Squaw Valley General Plan land use ordinance. I'm going to refer to it from here forward as the Olympic Valley General Plan land use ordinance, because I think we're at a point where we're transitioning. And so this is the existing land use setting where the resort base area is primarily composed of what is called village commercial zoning designation. That's what this existing, Intra-West phases 1 and 2 project is. We've got the heavy commercial area over here that includes the ski operations. The HDR 25 stuff, that is high density residential with a bedroom count per acre identifier. Same thing with the HDR 10. And so that's kind of the existing resort setting with respect to the land use designations. Out here at the east parcel, this nearly 9-acre parcel, we have a little bit of HDR 20 and then entrance commercial zoning. And so if you folks have any desire to learn more about the existing Squaw Valley General Plan land use ordinance, we do have that posted up online. Feel free to take a look at that. This is again from the specific plan. This is the proposed land use designations of the prior project that was approved and is about to be unadopted. And so this is the rebalancing of the land uses consisting of what are called under the land use plan of the specific plan, village commercial core. That's this area here, just immediately to the east and a little bit to the south of us. We've got forest recreation is the lime green. That effectively is an analog for what's already in the Olympic Valley General Plan. Same thing with the conservation preserve zoning that goes along the Squaw Creek, Olympic Creek corridor here and the Trapezoidal Channel. And then of course, so this is forest recreation, conservation preserve up here is what had been proposed. So the main two development areas are this village commercial core and the less intense village commercial neighborhood over further to the northwest. And then the mountain operations that are currently in this area would be relocated over to this area to the west. So that was what was proposed. Then obviously out the east parcel here, we had a mixture of, and I skipped an important piece. This is village commercial parking. That would continue to be day skier parking instead of just the surface level parking. It would also be one level of structured parking above it, and then podium parking under the building. So, whoops, back up real quick. My apologies. Out here, this is would be transitioned then to employee housing, intercept parking, a small retail market, and a shipping and receiving center. This is the illustrative plan that kind of graphically shows those things that I just described. So again, village commercial core, the neighborhoods, and the east parcel. And this is just again a close-up of the east parcel, again being directly across from the Public Service District offices. So I wanted to take an opportunity here to kind of go over just briefly the prior entitlement process and to outline that in this graphic. I wish it was a little bit bigger, but I think we'll get through it. And this is a representation kind of our major entitlement project review process that we went through last time that we will be reinitiating again. So the county receives a project application. And by the way, I'm going to have some information up. I have a project webpage that we have dedicated to the project. We'll be posting up some additional information there about that. But the county receives a project application. That project application gets distributed, all the materials to what's called the Development Review Committee, as well as our responsible agency partners for an initial notification review of the project and what it entails. We take in The comments from the Development Review Committee, primarily consisting of the Planning Division, Engineering and Surveying Division, Environmental Engineering, Department of Public Works, Parks and Recreation, in this instance, also the Public Service District, and look at that information to determine whether or not the project is complete. Typically, the project is not determined to be complete at a first review or even a second review in a major project. So the DRC has some back and forth comments, written comments that we provide back to the applicant on supplemental information, clarification of technical issues, technical studies, things like that. During that period of time, we will engage the Municipal Advisory Council and come to a forum such as this and have an informational presentation. Typically, the primary role of that, we're in a little bit different process this time with respect to how we're going about it. That's usually the first time that the MAC, or it may be the first time that the MAC is hearing about the project unless it's voluntarily come before them prior to the application. And that's an opportunity for the applicant to provide an overview of their proposal and receive feedback from the MAC on what folks' thoughts are. So we're here tonight, much in the same spirit. Then, as I said, we're moving on to revisions to the project responsive to those Development Review Committee comments, clarifications to technical studies, additional technical studies, technical information, things like that. Once an application is deemed complete on a major project such as this, subject to an EIR, we would initiate preparation of the environmental impact report. And so that tends to be as you folks know, a very, that's a long process. There's a lot of work that goes into that. Once that draft EIR, it's a little bit maybe somewhat misleading terminology, but the completed draft that has gone through a number of internal administrative reviews for vetting is correct. It gets circulated to the public and all the responsible agencies that may have a hand in the decision-making process or the permit process for a 45-day public review. During that period of time, we have a hearing before our Planning Commission to receive public comments. And then once that draft EIR public hearing and public review comment period closes, that's when the environmental consultant, the county, and the other technical consultants go back and say, okay, where do we need to make adjustments? Did we make errors? Are there additional things that we have to consider? Supplemental analyses, and that commences the preparation of the final EIR. And that is effectively what the final EIR is: any revisions to the draft plus providing responses to all comments that are received, regardless of where those originate from. During that period, because this typically elapses over a fairly long period of time, we would be in parallel conducting workshops on a project such as this with our Planning Commission and with our Board of Supervisors. So this description is effectively an analog of the process that we undertook the last time. It was about nearly 5 years. It was just about a month short of 5 years. The real public part of it was about 4, I would say. So I think I covered all that. And from there, we move into the project entitlement phase. And so the entitlement phase is really what I like to refer to as the wisdom of the decision-making process. That's where you get to determine the value and the conformity of the project to the setting and to the goals and policies of the county general plan, the community plan, and how the project may fit into a community or may not. And so again, when we reach that entitlement phase, and in this case, I think we're very fluid. We had a pretty long engagement with the Municipal Advisory Council the last time through. We also had the DRC process, and we came here a number of times, and I anticipate that will probably be a similar process again. So we will be visiting the MAC. Also, in addition to any informational updates that we'll be providing for an action. So the MAC makes a recommendation. Technically speaking, the recommendation is to the Planning Commission. But for all intents and purposes, it's to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors who ultimately makes the final decision on the project. Because in this case, these are legislative entitlements because they set policy and code, and that decision-making process is ultimately at the hand of the Board of Supervisors. So Planning Commission makes a package recommendations, and then county staff goes and presents that to the board for their decision. So with that, again, I'm Alex Fish. I did want to introduce Patrick Dobbs, senior planner. Patrick works with me. He's going to be the day-to-day project manager. I will remain involved in the project. And also, obviously, we have Jason Hansford, Vice President of Development, and Dee Byrne, your President of Altera. Okay, both with, oh, my apologies, Palisades Tahoe here with us tonight. So with that, I'll turn it back over unless anyone has questions for me.
I think the only clarification is at this point, you just went through a generic project and much of what's been done. And now I think Clayton is going to provide the legal background so we
Yes.
can go back and say, now what parts of this are going to move forward in what order? Is that right?
Yes, thank you. And I did forget to pause for Clayton. I apologize, Clayton.
That's okay. You were
that
doing
was,
a great job.
All good,
I
Alex.
was
All
on-
good, Alex.
I was on a roll.
Excuse me, is Jason also going to talk? After Clayton. Okay, great.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll pick up where Alex took off or where he stopped. Just so everyone's aware, I'm in the county counsel's office. My official title is supervising deputy county counsel. So Alex described the process that this project went through. That took place in November of 2016. It ultimately resulted in a board approval of that project. And then shortly after that, December of 2016, the county received a CEQA lawsuit over the project. And I think it's important to note and discuss, I guess, basically what a CEQA lawsuit is. That lawsuit under CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, it doesn't determine whether or not the project itself is a good idea. That's not really the role of CEQA. Instead, that role of whether the project is a good idea or not rests with the Municipal Advisory Council, then the Planning Commission, and ultimately the board. The role of CEQA is instead to determine whether all of the potential environmental impacts that project had, whether they were adequately analyzed, and whether the county either required certain mitigation or those impacts to be addressed in terms of some sort of way to resolve them, or if the impacts can't be addressed, then the board and the county would need to make a finding that there's a significant public benefit to the project, that it still is a reason why the project makes sense to go forward anyways. So that's the role of CEQA. And when we got a lawsuit on CEQA grounds, that CEQA challenge was basically, hey, the environmental document, that EIR, didn't address all of the environmental impacts that it should have addressed. And so we had a trial court filing in late 2016. There were 8 issues raised by the petitioner. And those issues consist of the following: emergency evacuations, traffic impacts, public transit impacts, greenhouse gas impacts, noise impacts, water impacts, and the county's rejection of alternatives. So the petition, which was filed by Sierra Watch, basically said the county's EIR didn't adequately look at all of those issues. So the trial court received briefing from the parties. And then in August of 2018, the trial court issued a decision, and that decision was that the county prevailed on all of those issues. So the county had adequately addressed those issues in the environmental impact report. So that's in August of 2018. The petitioner, Sierra Watch, filed an appeal 2 months later in October. The parties then briefed that appeal. Each of the briefs were somewhere around 75, 80 pages. So comprehensive briefing. The Court of Appeal issued a 50-page opinion in August of 2021. And it overturned some of the prior trial court's rulings. It also kept some of the prior trial court's rulings. The grounds that the county prevailed on were the discussion of air quality, climate change impacts, resultant mitigation, decision not to recirculate the EIR based on an altered emissions analysis. The Court of Appeal also found that traffic mitigation measures were adequate, and 7 of the 8 arguments that were raised on wildfire impacts were properly analyzed. There are grounds that the county didn't prevail on. There's 4 main areas of those. The first one is discussion of the Lake Tahoe water quality. And part of basically the court ruling on this was that there was vehicle miles traveled. The project would create vehicle miles traveled that would ultimately result in trips into the basin. And those trips in the basin had a potential to impact lake clarity within the basin. So that was the decision by the Court of Appeal. There was information that the county had included in the record, had analyzed with respect to this lake clarity issue. The problem was it wasn't identified in the draft EIR and the final EIR that Alex had talked about in the process, but was included in a response to comments after the final EIR. And the Court of Appeals said that was too late in the process to have included it in. So in terms of next steps and going forward, that's something that would need to be included in the revised EIR if when the county brings that forward. So that's the first issue, this discussion of Lake Tahoe water clarity. And I should note on this issue too, the reason it wasn't included in is because in that initial EIR, the draft EIR and the final EIR, is that vehicle miles traveled by itself is not an environmental impact. It results in greenhouse gases, and that was addressed in other aspects of the EIR. And this question of whether or not vehicle miles traveled impacts lake clarity, there wasn't a clear connection between those two in that 2016 time frame. And that's what the county disclosed in that document, that later document that wasn't included in the EIR. So this is something that going forward, the county would have to look at with more specificity and analyze that further. The next big issue was discussion of wildfire impacts. I mentioned before, there were 8 issues with wildfire impacts raised by the petitioner. County prevailed on 7 of those. The one that the county didn't prevail on was an argument that the county underestimated evacuation times because it assumed emergency responders would provide traffic control. And there was a letter in the record from the fire chief stating that public safety personnel would be tasked with higher priority tasks and wouldn't be able to provide traffic control. And I would categorize this as a more of an explanation issue. In reality, that traffic control will be performed by the sheriff's office, not by fire department staff. And that's a distinction that would need to be made and clarified by the county on this point. So that was the second big issue. The third big one was discussion of noise impacts. The EIR itself analyzed noise impacts for activities occurring within 50 feet of sensitive receptors. And sensitive receptors are schools, residences, those types of activities. And the court's opinion basically was, while the county did analyze those within the first 50 feet, an analysis need to be done outside the 50 feet, so that 50 feet and beyond. And the reason that the county didn't analyze that in the first EIR was that's where the most significant impacts would be, is in that first 50 feet, with the impacts being less as you get further away from it. But that is also something that we would address and look at going forward. There also was a mitigation measure with respect to construction noise that the court took issue with. And the county had included a mitigation measure that said construction operations and techniques needed to be replaced with quieter procedures where feasible. And the court said that mitigation measure was somewhat vague. It needed to have more specificity as to what would be included with reduction of those quieter procedures or inclusion of those quieter procedures. And then the last big section was transit impacts. The county had included a mitigation measure to require fair share funding for TART or formation of a Community Facilities District to fund the cost of increased transit services. The court looked at that mitigation measure and thought that there needed to be more specificity as to where that funding would go and what would occur with that funding. So those are the issues the Court of Appeal took. And I apologize, this is somewhat of a generalization of things. That it's a 50-page opinion. There is certainly more on each of these details, but those are the items that the Court of Appeal took issue with. This is a partially published opinion. So if anyone is interested, there is an actual official case citation for it. It's 69 Cal App 5th 86. If you want to read through the whole opinion. So you have a Court of Appeal issuance of that decision, and that occurred August of 2021. So next steps after that, that Court of Appeal opinion basically directs the matter back to the trial court to issue a writ that is in conformance with that opinion. And the issuance of a writ is a requirement to the county to rescind the project approvals. And when there is a sequel lawsuit like this that rules against the county, the trial court basically rescinds everything connected to the EIR. So what you have is a writ that was issued. That writ itself was issued August 9th, so just a month ago. The county actually got served it a couple weeks ago. So that writ gives the county 90 days to rescind those original project approvals. So that will be coming forward to the county board at some point in the next 90 days. And the county will then be rescinding all those project approvals, which will basically be like putting this back to the point it was before the project was approved originally. In terms of next steps on the CEQA side, the court also ruled that the county needed to correct these deficiencies in order to move forward with the project or recertify the EIR. So we have received a request from the applicant to keep, to proceed with these edits, to revise the environmental impact report to deal with the concerns raised by the Court of Appeal. And we're currently underway with that process in terms of adding to the analysis on those points. And that will come back before the Municipal Advisory Council and the Planning Commission and the board through that same process that Alex had laid out before with respect to this revised EIR that will include in that information. So those are the broad strokes of the next steps in terms of things. And yeah, I'll turn it back over to Alex. I don't know if you want to add anything or somebody else might want to.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you, Clayton. David, would you like me to take a seat? Take a seat nearby, maybe?
Good evening, MAC members and the county and county staff. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to do what I think we'll call a level set. Clearly, there was a lot said there. It's very confusing and a very convoluted process. In lieu of doing a presentation and telling you where things are and what the project was, really to be respectful of kind of the public process that a lot of these people have been engaged in, as well as the MAC members. We'd like to have an open dialogue tonight and hear comments or answer questions. There's been a lot offered tonight that's very confusing, and I think between county staff and county council, as well as the applicants, we're happy to engage in any dialogue that you'd like to have. Jason Hansford, I'm the Vice President of Development for Palisades Tahoe. And yeah, and I'd like to introduce Dee as well, Dee Byrne, President of the resort as well. She's here as well. Thank you.
Okay. So the purpose of tonight is to ask questions. The purpose of tonight is not necessarily to make soapbox statements or opinion statements or whatever, but there's been a lot of information that some of it's been rumor, some of it's been factual, some of it's been not. So the idea tonight is to ask the county, ask the legal people, ask the developer your questions about what is going to happen. I suspect that there are going to be a lot of questions, And so we need some sort of process in order to control the questions. Plus, we have people here and we also have people in Zoom land. So here's what we're going to do. Everyone, we also want us to control the multi-part questions. We don't want any one person dominating. So everybody who has a question, great. Ask a question. Don't ask multiple questions. We'll do a round robin. So the MAC members will get a chance to ask a question, just like everybody else. Everybody in the audience, raise your hand if you have a question. You come to the podium, identify yourself, ask your question. There'll be no back and forth dialogue with whoever you're asking the question. You'll have an opportunity to follow it up the next round. Then we'll go out to the people in Zoom land and give them a chance to do the same thing. Ask a question of whomever you want who made the presentations this morning. And then after everyone has had a chance to ask their first question, we'll do the whole thing again. All right. And either we'll run out of questions or we'll run out of time, whichever comes first. But please be respectful of the presenters. Please be respectful of the process. This is not the opportunity, again, to stand on a soapbox. There'll be a lot of other public hearings where you can make your opinions known. This is an opportunity to learn what has actually happened. All right, what does all the steps that have gone on to this point mean? I mean, I don't understand it, and I've probably have been as involved in this process as anybody. So, everybody sort of understand that? County agree? Great. All right, so we'll start down that end of the table. Do you have a question?
I've listened to everything as closely as I could, but I still don't fully understand the process. I understand the lawsuit and what the terms of it were, but does the whole plan have to be reviewed, or is it just the elements that were considered by the court? And is that the only portion, or when you rescind the writ, does the whole plan have to be reviewed, just like we did in the first place? I didn't get it before. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And yeah, I apologize in advance. This is a confusing topic. I'll do my best, but please feel free to ask follow-up questions if needed. So on the environmental impact report, the Court of Appeal has indicated the areas that need to be cleaned up to then certify that EIR again. So on the environmental impact side, what the county will be doing is looking only at those items that the Court of Appeal said, hey, these are the deficient areas that need to be fixed. Now, from a project entitlement side, that's I guess a separate vein. That whole project entitlement will come again before the Municipal Advisory Council, the Planning Commission, and the board to decide whether the project as a whole still makes sense. That project was approved in 2016 after going through all that process. So it will go through that process again, and there will be public input, and members of the council, the planning commission, and the board will make a determination whether or not the project as a whole should go forward. That's a separate vein from the environmental review, which is limited to those areas that the Court of Appeal asked. Does that help?
It helps a little. I guess that's the best that can be said. It's just.
Let's see what other people ask.
Yeah.
Okay. You have a question?
My question basically has to do with whether there's any participation in the process at this stage with Sierra Watch, or you're going to wait till it's all done and see what they say.
Was that directed to the county or to Sierra Watch?
So Clayton, feel free to jump in if you like, but effectively, we're fully engaged in a public process and, you know, all voices are welcome in that process. And so can you ask your question again, please, Andrew, just to make sure I'm clear?
Well, Sierra Watch was the main party in terms of the lawsuit.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of money behind Sierra Watch. And my question really is Alterra going to be working with Sierra Watch before they have a final plan and made approved by the county, or is it going to wait until it's all over and see what happens?
Sure. Obviously, I won't answer for Alterra. Obviously, the county's process, as I said, is an open public review. It's what we kind of term as a de novo process, right? We're going through a new, and all of those things are on the table. I know that there was initially at the very beginning of the last entitlement review, probably around 2012, that there was some early discussions, but moving forward, I don't have the answers on that. I could defer to the applicant.
Yeah, the litigation is with the county for the certification of the EIR. We are going to move forward in a fashion that is disclosing of the project and make sure that we address issues that are of concern.
If there are things that have changed since the original EIR was completed, and since the studies that provided the information that EIR relied on to come to their conclusions, if things have changed, for example, maybe we find out, and I'm just saying, you know, hypothetically, maybe we find out that there's now studies where we have less water, or that people have made new developments that have now taken water that wasn't, you know, counted on the first go around. Or if we find now that wildfire behavior is different than people previously calculated, where potentially it could sweep across this parking lot. So now we're not going to go and sit in the parking garage. We're going to all escape, which is going to put more vehicles onto the road than what was calculated during the original studies for the EIR. So things that are new information, but that aren't specifically, or a change in information, but that aren't specifically one of the 4 items that was addressed in the sequel lawsuit, will those items then get readdressed in an EIR?
Yeah, I'm happy to field that, Alex. So yes, great question. Normally, so the way this process would work under CEQA and that EIR review is the project is evaluated from that point in time when the notice of preparation of the EIR was originally set out. So that's 2011. So that's the framework that the county at a base level needs to work from, is that 2011 timeframe. So those are the requirements that would be in place. I should also note, though, this is no kind of bright line. If there are significant changes to the environment, those are things that we will be looking at and evaluating. And I do think it is also important to look at that from not only the EIR perspective, but that project entitlement perspective that the council and the commission are looking at. From an environmental review perspective, the timeline is that stuck in 2012 timeframe, but from a, I guess, public participation county review side, all of that stuff would certainly weigh into your decisions, as well as the planning commission and board's decisions as to what is a project that makes sense for the county.
Can I clarify something, or am I not allowed to? Okay. He didn't answer what I was trying to ask.
Do you have a question? Okay, I'm next, yeah, okay. Well, I do have a question. The question is, you know, I heard that we at MAC are going to be, I guess, counseled in the process and, you know, participate in something
with this whole process. So I would like to get some kind of an explanation. What is really expected from the MAC? Are you going to ask and actually listen to technical stuff, or is it just going to be, yes, this is okay, or this is not okay? And in relation to that, would you kindly send us, I'm talking probably to Curtis here, can we get a copy of that court ruling, so with all those points that the court objected to, so that we can in fact get prepared in time to understand what is expected from us?
So I think oh, good, my mic's working. I can address Vladimir's question. I think I understood what you're after, Vladimir. And it's kind of a distinction about the MAC's role with regard to what are you all making a recommendation on? Is it the project, or is it the project and the environmental review analysis and the adequacy of it? The technical answer is that the Municipal Advisory Council handbook sets the parameters for what the MAC's role and responsibility in making recommendations is. And the MAC's recommendation is on the disposition of the entitlements, if you will. So whether or not those entitlements should be approved, should not be approved, should be approved with changes, things of that nature. The MAC does not make a specific recommendation on the adequacy of an environmental analysis. And, generally speaking, some of those things do come up at MAC meetings topically because they are part of the project. And so there will certainly be discussions of those relevant topical areas. There just won't be, for instance, as part of the MAC's action item, there would not be a request from the county for the MAC to make a recommendation on the EIR. It would just be on the specific plan entitlements. The second part of that, I do believe that we can make that the court case available for you.
Okay, thank you.
And Clayton, let me know if that is different in some way.
Not good.
No, yes, we can certainly make the court opinion available. It is also a public document. You can go to Google and type in 69 Cal App 5th 86 and it will pop up. There's a Google Scholar function in Google that has it available as well. So yes, but not a problem to make it available. And we can certainly do that.
Thank you.
It's just for clarification. So we're basing decisions on this project, traffic and wildfire, fire and water quality studies from 2011, or are we going to be basing this on all the information as of today? Just 2011 or today? What is that answer?
So Clayton, I'll look to you. That's a CEQA baseline question.
Yes, so the EIR will be evaluated based on that 2011 timeframe when the original evaluation of the project started. For purposes of your entitlements and whether or not this is a good project, you will be looking at everything up to current date. But the environmental review portion of it is based on that 2011 baseline, that timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
So my question is to Jason. Is it the intent right now of the project to reevaluate it based on the specific plan as it exists today with no changes?
Well, I think that's why we're here tonight, to get if there are any questions or comments or concerns that evolved to the specific plan that was adopted in 2016. There were 3 years of public input, 300 public meetings to go along with that. And we're here today to listen and hear, and those projects will be brought before you again. If it is in that form, you can bring questions in regards to that plan and address those as you see fit.
Okay, so who out there would like to ask a question? Bob, identify yourself, please.
This is Bob Barnett, and it's perhaps a question directed to council. What is the timing on the EIR evaluation in relationship to the project entitlement process? In other words, who decides that the EIR, once it's resubmitted, is okay? And is that a prerequisite to going forward with the project entitlement process?
Yes, so the EIR, the revised EIR that will be coming forward, that will be reviewed by the Planning Commission and then ultimately approved by the board. And that goes concurrent with the project entitlements. So the Municipal Advisory Council will review the project entitlements, then we'll go to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will then send it to the board. And the board will ultimately certify that revised EIR if they believe it adequately addresses all of the issues, and then approve the project entitlements if they are supportive of the project.
So just a follow-up question on that. So the EIR evaluation is done as of 2011, but the project entitlement process is as of 2022 or whenever it goes, but those proceed simultaneously. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes. Please identify yourself.
Good evening. I'm Tom Moores of the aforementioned organization, Sierra Watch. Boy, I have a lot to say, but the chair has done a very good job to make sure that we don't say too much. I have two questions, but I'll only ask one, and maybe we'll get a chance to ask another. Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to get an update. Really appreciate it, but this does feel a little bit like all aboard on a train wreck. That we've seen this movie, many of us have lived it, and it feels like here we go again. Sierra Watch believes that there is a better way that could lead to a happy ending, and my question is a process question. My question is, would this MAC, would the county consider convening a community effort to pursue collaborative planning? So take a time out from the train wreck and see if we, community members, planners, conservationists, and Alterra could come up with a limited development alternative that would make sense for everyone without engaging in another 10 years of conflict, and most important, without jeopardizing everything that we love about our mountains, because I think this valley and Tahoe deserve no less. So again, my question to the MAC and to the county is, would the MAC consider advising, or would the county consider convening some kind of collaborative planning effort?
I can answer the question, and I'm not going to answer directly for the applicant, Tom, but it's a very well-placed question. And fortunately, I have the benefit of you and I having some of these discussions quite a long time ago to rely on for some of the answer here. And please remind me, Peter, what was his last name?
Peter Van Zant.
Peter Van Zant, that's right.
So that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
2011 was a long time ago.
So, you actually asked that question early on in the process, and I met with you and Peter, and I think you were simultaneously outreaching to what was at the time Squaw Valley Real Estate, Travis Jose and his team on that same thing. And we certainly had those discussions, and we were open to an opportunity for the applicant and you all to work together to come up with something that you could agree upon, if that would be the case. Now, obviously, it is a private development project, and it is on private property. So I can't tell you unless somebody thinks I'm off base here that we could necessarily force that on somebody. But certainly, if the opportunity is there, like I said, we're here to listen. So.
Well, and I might follow up as one of those that will be in a decision-making process on this. That to me, Tom, every process I've been involved with the county is a collaborative process with listening to the community, talking to the applicants and coming back with ideas. So I don't see that as any different than anything else I've done in my career up here. Is we bring groups together, we hear, that's why we do public meetings, why we have MACs, and why we take that public input. And hopefully that results in an outcome that makes the majority happy. May not make all happy, we rarely get to 100%, but we certainly try really hard to get there. And so really open to hearing what are those areas in which, you know, I know you have very strong feelings on this, and as I'm brand new and still learning about the project and those concerns, want to make sure that we hear all of those tonight, so we can talk more about that.
Okay, but we're not supposed to share our strong feelings, right, Chairman?
Yeah.
We're not here to share strong feelings tonight.
But, you know, my for that, so.
There
please
will be
do.
plenty of opportunity to do that. Other people have questions, please.
Maybe this is for county council, I'm not sure. I don't find the process confusing. I've read all the pleadings. But tonight was the first time I really understood that although as citizens of California, we all know so much more about wildfire and drought than we did in 2011, when the problems with the EIR are addressed, that knowledge won't be considered. And so I have a process question, because I think I've heard a lot of people in this room are concerned about this. And I think a lot of people in this room feel like it should be addressed. So what is the process for getting that addressed before ground's broken and development begins? What's the process for getting that addressed?
Yeah, I can provide that answer. Yeah, so yeah, the process for that will be during the county's review of the revised EIR and ultimately going through the process with the Municipal Advisory Council and the Planning Commission and the board. We'll be making sure that the project entitlements match and address all of the issues that are important to this project. So while the EIR review is limited to the one fire evacuation issue that the court pointed out, the project entitlement process and the ultimate county review of it will take that into account.
Before you leave the podium, could we get your name, please?
Oh, yeah, Maggie Hand.
Anybody else? Yes.
Good evening, Olympic Valley MAC members, Placer County staff, and Palisades staff. My name is Alexis Aller. I'm the Executive Director of Mountain Area Preservation, and our organization, while we were not a party to the litigation, we were very active since 2011, 2012 in this process. So we do know the project quite well. And I think one of my biggest concerns tonight is that we're going to be looking at the existing conditions baseline of 2011 and 2012. And anyone that lives in this community understands that we are not in 2011 and 2012 conditions. Our community has changed drastically. Resort development is no longer occupied at 20% or 50%. We're looking at 100% occupancy of dwelling units. And that changes not only the character, but also the environmental constraints of what can be brought forward in the built environment. And so tonight, I would like for the county to address how they plan to look at this in the draft EIR, because our population and the development capacity and the sheer amount of people living in Truckee, Tahoe is very different than it was in 2011 and 2012. And we cannot look past that when we're looking at new proposals. So if the county could address that, I would appreciate it.
It's really, it does kind of speak to a CEQA baseline condition. I'm going to defer to our council.
Those factors are certainly on many people's minds, and yeah, there are things that have changed since 2012, and those will be evaluated by the county as it goes through the entitlement process. I think it's important to kind of look at this in two separate dynamics. One with the EIR and going through and reviewing that EIR based on what the Court of Appeal told us to fix, and another one in terms of what does the county see on the entitlement side that is needed to address these issues.
Anybody else ask a question? Oh, no, wait till everybody's had a chance. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Mott Schweitzer. I just have a quick question. In terms of the plan, it's going to be submitted as it was in its entirety, same exact plan submitted. I only asked because the 90,000 square foot water park, there was a rumor floating around that maybe it had been taken out of the plan, and I was curious whether it was still in the plan.
First of all, the water park is not a defined entity at all. We're below 70,000 square feet. The MAC is a mountain adventure center that is really relative to programming. If you look at the village specific plan, it allows for bowling alleys, community centers, fitness. Certainly water activities are an important component, we think, for being able to get into pools and get water recreation. But there is a wide variety of activities that would be allowed in that facility. And frankly, it hasn't been programmed yet. It's going to be community driven, market driven. We're not going to build something that isn't utilized by the public and our guests as well.
So down to 70,000 square foot water park.
Well, that's what the zoning allows. So,
okay, thank you.
Anybody else in the audience want to ask a question? All right, oh, sorry.
Hi, I'm Susan Lissagore. So just to kind of one more clarification, it appears that the EIR is an antique that will be, will go through its process, but that it seems like it will be possible, but I'm not sure exactly how. During the process of entitlement, that there'll be what are the mechanisms for actually addressing the concerns in a changing environment? Not any changing, the EIR isn't changing, but the environment has. So I think there may not be an answer to how that process is going to go forward, but anybody who can give us a little more sense of how that'll work would be helpful. Thank you.
Again, I do have to defer to our council because we're really kind of tying this back to a CEQA baseline condition issue. Seems to be the theme of the questions.
Right. So this will be addressed during the evaluation process of the entitlements. So this will be addressed in terms of staff evaluating the project, the advisory council evaluating the project, the planning commission evaluating the project. That process still is going to occur, and there's going to be public comment through that, and that evaluation process is going to occur through all of those different avenues. The environmental impact report has a baseline that's set, but I guess those discussions, that doesn't mean those discussions don't take place. It just means those discussions take place in the form of reviewing the project and deciding whether or not it makes sense to approve it.
So Clayton, I think for the public and actually for your supervisor who's sitting here, as we look at conditions of approval and we move through those approval hearings, all of these public comments come forward. We're very aware. I mean, I live here. I understand the concerns that people are expressing. And we will take those into account as we move forward through the entitlement process. And I think to the public, when that's going to happen and how that happens is going to come at a next, after we've taken this initial public comment, looked at the timeline for the process, and then we can give a more detailed schedule for when those public hearings will occur, when it will come back to the MAC and those, and the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. But that is what we get elected to do.
Yeah,
So,
and yeah,
take it
it's a good
very
point.
serious. And I know that's not concrete. I think we wanted to get out in front of the community tonight. Right away, we got the RIP. We know we have to rescind the approvals. Now, what's that process look like? And how do we embark on that journey together to address those issues?
Yeah, and I've been referring to the entitlement process and the entitlements, but there really is a lot to those entitlements. You've got a specific plan that's being approved. You've got development standards, you've got design guidelines, you've got a development agreement between the county and the applicant that has conditions that the county wants to see and that's going to contractually require be included in the project. So you have all of those things that are going to be part of that entitlement package that's going to be coming back before and going through the public process and then ultimately coming to the board for a decision. So all of those have the possibility to be tweaked, modified, edited based on current day needs and interests.
Yes. Hi, I'm Richard Koffler. I'm one of the newbies. I've only lived in the valley for a year and a half. And question relates to what I think is a mismatch, at least in my understanding. The gentleman presented a very nice color-coded map that had a very deep red section, which I suspect is where most of the complaints are coming from. So I figured that was all defined, but like 2 minutes ago, it became clear that what the content of that development is not yet defined. It's still what all the jargon programming and all that language, which I understand, but it sounds to me like it's not defined. So the question is, how can you have an environmental impact report for something that you don't know what it is? Or at least the way I understand it is that we don't know what it is because it hasn't been yet defined. How do you create an EIR for some abstract concept to define after it's approved?
So I believe, sir, you're asking about the Mountain Adventure Center that this gentleman asked a question about a few minutes
That's
ago.
in the red zone, which I
Yeah,
suspect that most of the complaints come from all the stuff that's gonna go in the deep red zone.
So the Mountain Adventure Center would be located in the Village Commercial Core over in this area. You are correct. With regard to how do you evaluate it in the EIR, we did actually study the level of visitorship and how much water, if it was a wet facility, how much based on those programming elements, because there's a lot of things in there other than that, as Mr. Hansford said, but how much water does that take for flushing and changing out and all of those things?
So in other words, is a maximum condition?
It is based on the visitorship. So one of the things we evaluated through a lot of surveys that were conducted concurrent with the preparation of the EIR of the existing village was visitorship patterns and levels of occupancy, length of stay, time of arrival, those kind of things that end up going into become the data points that fulfill the technical studies that help to make up the EIR analysis.
Just to make sure I understand, not a question, just make sure I understand. Yep. So this is an abstract model based on some assumptions that could be exceeded in practice.
No, could not be exceeded. So it is identified with a maximum square footage and maximum development potential, and that is analyzed if it were to. So when we, let's say a project, let's use the past analogy of the project was approved in 2016. And if there had not been a lawsuit and development had proceeded, and the applicant had then come forward with a development proposal to implement that portion of the specific plan, and the conformity review process that we go through to make sure that all of the project proposal is within the prior environmental analysis. If it's going to exceed it in any way, that would typically trigger a revised environmental impact, a supplemental environmental impact report.
Can I rephrase his question a bit?
Of course, you're the chairman, Dave.
The environmental impact report has to evaluate the impact of a specific plan, of a project.
Yes.
Okay. So I asked earlier to Jason, is it the intent of the developer to present the specific plan or not change the specific plan, to go forward with the specific plan as it currently exists? And I believe the answer was, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I believe the answer was, we're open to consider changes. If we're open, if Altera or the developer is open to consider changes, then the environmental impact report is sort of trying to match a moving target. That is, it really can't be evaluated in full until the specific plan is nailed down.
Yeah, we're getting into semantics here, but clearly there is an opportunity there where there could be changes to a project that would actually affect the EIR. For example, if there was not a MAC, that could, while it appears on the surface, maybe minimize impacts at large. It also changes traffic patterns, that if you're looking at people staying here for a longer duration or not leaving the valley or staying longer so that you could disperse traffic patterns, there is a chicken and egg effect that happens on a lot of those things. So when we talk about resubmitting the plan or looking at a revised plan, there's been a lot of work that's been done to date. And that is the plan that we're currently looking at. But certainly if there is input and community outreach that dictates that we should do something different, we should listen to that.
So that may raise the question that Tom raised earlier. If you're open to those inputs, might the developer / the county create a forum where those kind of inputs can be made, as opposed to just, let's say, a MAC meeting?
Maybe I'll take the second part of your prior question, because I thought it was important. An environmental analysis requires a stable project description, and that was the point you were making, and you're correct. So to the extent that there would be modifications to the project, it is important to have those things known in advance of completion of the re-undertaken environmental review process. So, there could always be, for example, I am going to provide a little bit more clarity though. If, for example, you went through a process and you had an approval of a specific plan, and oftentimes we're implementing several specific plans in the western part of the county. As you undertake the actual development, there are minute shifts and adjustments, and you have to do some conformity review to evaluate whether those things could potentially exacerbate an impact, increase the severity of an impact. Oftentimes, if you are not developing to the full intensity of the allowance of the land use, that would tend to say you're not going to have an increased impact. The point that Jason was making was that, and this was there was a lot of time invested in this with the two traffic consultants, the applicants and the county's EIR analysis, environmental consultant, traffic consultant, sorry, on this was how to mitigate the effects of people all wanting to arrive and depart at the same time. And so a lot of that has to do with, discounted hotel stays if you arrive early or if you check in early, après-ski activities to keep people from jumping off the hill, getting into their vehicles and immediately hitting the road. So having other options for people to undertake, things in the village, or even if it's just things like where you have other family activities or just recreational activities. So those are important considerations. I hope that made sense. Yeah.
Anybody else here have a question? Have you asked one already? Please come up. How many people are in the online world? I'm sorry? And how many people want to ask questions?
Well, currently we have one question in Q&A, and then we can ask people to raise their hands when we're
Okay.
ready to address this.
All right. So we want to give those people a chance also. By all means, go ahead.
I'll speak quickly. I'm Troy Turner. So if I understand correctly,
And then
Troy Turner, other than the 5 areas that the appeals court has asked for a new explanation of, that will be 2023 explanation. Is everything else in the proposal, from the development, the proposal entitlements, and the EIR, are they all 11 to 6-year-old answers? Will they all get updated with the knowledge we have now? Like, for example, that 10 years worth of people might have moved to Truckee in the last year, and what we know about fires and things like that. Will the rest of the EIR be updated, or will just those 6 areas be addressed?
Clayton, I think this one's for you again.
Yeah, I had trouble hearing, so please let me know if I don't address all of your questions. So the EIR itself, we will only be focusing on those 4 or 5 issues addressed by the Court of Appeal. But the project itself, we will be looking at kind of all of the current day issues to see if those entitlements still make sense. But I think, yeah, the EIR is somewhat on a separate track in that respect. And just to kind of address the questions that are coming up with respect to modifying it. Right now, we have the project that was approved in 2016 as the one that's connected to the EIR. Ultimately, if there are project modifications, if those project modifications don't increase environmental impacts, then there may be less or no changes needed to the EIR. If you had a project modification that significantly increased in environmental impact, then you potentially would be looking at adding a section to the EIR to address that project change. But if you're simply reducing the scope of the project, then you wouldn't necessarily need to revise the EIR because you wouldn't be having an increase in the environmental impacts from that base project that was approved in 2016.
Okay, so we have one question under the Q&A, and the question is for D, and it's from Alex. Yep, and it's from Alex Bosenberg. And it says, in your new role as the head of the resort, can you outline your thought process on different strategic options for the project post lawsuit, your perspective on the business need for the project, and your message to the community on the path forward?
Hi, Dee Byrne. Thanks for the question. And before I answer, if I might, just thank everybody for your attendance this evening and for your service to our community. It's critical, and we're, under my leadership, the resort is only interested in being a good community member and neighbor. And I think there were 3 questions there, Caitlin, you might have to help me, but in general, what we talk about in our company is we're here to serve people. And who are our people? Our people are our community, our employees, our guests, our financial stakeholders. Everybody plays a part in that. The challenge to us is to balance the needs. Who are our people and what are their needs? We don't want to do a project that the community doesn't support, that our employees don't support, and that our financial stakeholders don't support. And I would consider all of you our financial stakeholders, right? Along with our commercial tenants, anybody that relies on our property tax, our TOT, our visitation to make their cash registers sing. So I'm committed under my leadership to make sure we do learn, we do listen, and it's an iterative process. And I can't stand up here tonight and say we're going to do this because we're not at that phase yet. Caitlin, help me out. What else is in there?
See, it said, can you outline your thought process on different strategic options for the project?
Well, I would say that obviously I'm new to this role, but I've been here 11 years. I was partisan to the prior process, but I wasn't, quite frankly, I was busy in my other role, so I didn't pay specific attention, but I know that and respect that there was a lot of different strategic intent and different strategic avenues that were addressed and considered at the time, like the MAC. And that through that process, through the 5 years, I know the plan was changed significantly through the years. I think the project strategically still fits in my understanding. I still need to, quite honestly, read every word in the specific plan. I read it, but I don't know it well enough to be able to recite it to you this evening. But I think it still fits strategically. We want to, I will share, we want to be a 4-season resort. We want people to come to enjoy Palisades Tahoe any time of year. We're out of balance right now. Most of our visitation is in winter. We know how awesome this place is, how awesome are our mountains. Tom said it. We love them too. We want to share them. We're passionate about that. We're passionate about recreation and what it offers to people. Recreation enriches lives, it changes lives. I talk about transformation. That's what we're not just about offering experience. We're about offering transformational experiences and making a difference in the lives of our guests and our community. So that's a little bit, I guess, on kind of what's in my head, but strategically it needs to make sense again for all of the stakeholders. Did I hit all three?
Thank you. I believe so. Yes.
All right. Thanks a lot.
And then I would like, if there's anybody on Zoom who would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and I can allow you to talk and unmute your mic. We'll give you a few minutes for that.
No one?
No, I'm not seeing anybody.
All right, so we'll go back to the map. You have a question? Go ahead.
Okay, from what I've been hearing, it sounds like the EIR is more of a data-driven report, research, technical studies, experts vetting these studies, where entitlement sounds a little bit more creative, conceptual, has a lot more feel to it. How does the community feel? How does the MAC feel? So in terms of the questions that have been repeatedly asked tonight about the EIR, in light of the fact that we are in a changing area, I mean, a lot has changed in the last 10 years. So where is the data going to come from regarding that change? How is that going to be quantified? Or is it a bunch of people at the mic saying, I feel like it's changed. There's a lot different. We need to look at this. Or where is the research going to come from? Is that going to be coming from the county? Or is that something that needs to be funded in another way?
And so I'm hearing a very consistent theme, and it really does tie back to the California Environmental Quality Act baseline condition of when the project was initiated. And Clayton, jump in if you feel like it. This is a fairly technical issue that has got quite a bit of law behind it. And that's where I'm going to diverge. But basically the simple answer from somebody who is not an attorney is the baseline condition is established at the time of the project application. And I'll leave off there, and maybe Clayton wants to pick up on the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. It is based, the baseline for CEQA purposes is when the project is initiated, which is in 2011, 2012. To the extent there are other issues, and yeah, I certainly get that there are other issues that may come up, and certainly fire evacuation is on everyone's mind. To the extent that there are those issues, we will we will be looking into them and evaluating those with respect to the project entitlements. The extent of looking into them probably depends on the issues and kind of where everyone is on those. But just because the EIR is based on 2011, 2012 timeframe doesn't mean that those issues aren't going to be evaluated with respect to the overall project.
When the EIR goes back to the Board of Supervisors, for them to approve the 4 items that were in the writ that need to be corrected, does the Board of Supervisors, are they only able to vote on approving the EIR if those 4 particular items are corrected in a satisfactory manner, or if there are other items that aren't one of the 4 items that they feel are not satisfactory in the EIR due to changing times, can the board not certify the EIR, but ask the developer to go back and redo other parts that we know have changed, such as wildfires, traffic, water. There was a 4th one, but you get the general idea.
Yeah, I do.
So
And
that's a process question.
yeah, and the simple answer is yes, and that would begin with the Planning Commission. Actually, the Planning Commission takes the first shot at certification of the environmental impact report. And if the Planning Commission determines that there are deficiencies, they would presumably direct staff to go back and address those issues.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's.
if I could
that's
just
what-
add to that comment too.
No. Go ahead, Clayton.
So those 4 items are what the Court of Appeal has said needs to be looked at to, I guess, result in a EIR that would pass court review. Certainly, to the extent the county is interested in more analysis, or people are interested in more analysis, that those things could be done as part of the process.
And then what I was adding, Clayton, is that draft document goes out for circulation for public comment, public review, and then goes to the commission and to the board. And so all those issues are discussed again and again. So I'm confident that the community, and the community's already expressed traffic, the change in population, evacuation, water. I've heard those comments. I don't think that's a surprise to any of us sitting here living in this community, that those are strong concerns of this community. And we do constantly monitor traffic and know, vehicle miles traveled in and out of the basin, in and out of the region, what we're experiencing and those sorts of things. Certainly on fire and evacuation, we've learned a lot. And so I think all of those things are going to be taken into very careful consideration as we move forward.
Sorry about that. The fact is that any results of engineering projects and consequently any result of scientific research is only as good as the data that are leading to a given conclusion. And we are talking about a project that is now, I guess, 11 years old since we first started talking about it. And knowing how long typically it takes to get through an EIR approval process, it's probably going to be a few more years before any construction will start. And as a scientist who is directly involved in climate change research, leading hopefully to some mitigation, I can tell you that what we are talking about here today in terms of environmental conditions and what the planet is going to do to Olympic Valley valley itself is unpredictable. And it's going to be dramatically different than what it is today on September 7th. And so, you know, I'm just curious where this whole thing is going. Because we do not know what the future holds. And there is nobody who can today predict what is going to happen a year from now. Simply, we do not have enough data, reliable data, measured data that will allow us to predict what's going to be happening on the basis of those data, what's going to be happening a year from now. So, you know, I enjoyed this discussion here. I understand, you know, what the issues are. I don't quite understand what the legal issues were. So the court, you know, objected, okay? But whatever we do, I think we will have to expect the uncertainty of the effect of those results. Is there a question in there? No, this is not a question. This is basically, oh yeah, it is a question. The
But we
question
do have
is,
another one online when we're done.
no, the question really is, how are we as MAC and, you know,
The county.
the county, how are we going to make decisions that are based on uncertainty? That's the question.
So, back out to the public. Are there anybody want to ask a follow-up question? Richard? Yeah, we'll do that second.
Me again, trying to see if I can understand this. 11 years ago, Altera, whatever, what do I call it? Palisades Tahoe. Submitted a plan, which I think is called a specific plan, that consisted of a map with a bunch of buildings and infrastructure, color-coded green, yellow, red. But it's an abstraction. EIR has been produced on the basis of that assumption, that abstraction, say, we think we'll put these buildings here, we'll put these buildings there. The EIR now is all litigated and talking about those, which, if I understand it, these are maximums, because at one point, these abstractions will become concrete plans. Now we have a specific architectural and engineering plan to put this right here now. That requires then a further approval. And this is the question, to do that and to take this abstraction called a specific plan, poor name for it, but there it is, into reality of buildings and infrastructure, there'll have to be an approval to make sure that it complies with the expectation and the approval. Did I get this right?
It is a very astute question you have asked.
But did I get it right or not?
And yes, you did.
Okay. Yeah. And yes, part B, how do we address Vladimir's point that the world is changing and now we have an antiquated, probably wrong, I'm an engineer like I suspect he is, and plans never pan out.
I'll
With
tackle
all
the.
respect to the planners in the room.
Hey, thank you.
They never
Appreciate
happen.
it. So the specific plan is as it, you know, its name implies, it does have a level of specificity to it that is substantially beyond what you would typically have in a community plan that sets policies and goals and a community development element, transportation element, things like that. In this particular instance, because of the intensity of the use at the resort base, and I would say the intensity of interest from the public in this project, you know, between the county's effort to guide the applicant and the applicant's study of how to undertake this project, it became very clear early on that we would have to go to a much higher level of detail in the planning effort. And so to that end, this specific plan has an implementing zoning code and design regulations. Mr. Stepner actually chaired the design review committee, I think, through all of that, provided a lot of guidance back to the applicant on that. And the level of, you know, in a specific plan, typically you have colors and it's like, yeah, residential housing can go there somewhere in there. In this instance, it got down to the level of this portion of this building has to have these setbacks. It can only have this number of bedrooms and square footage of commercial. It can only be this tall. It must have these architectural elements. It must step back at a certain height. It must have a ratio of open area to, what was it called? The plaza? Remind me, I'm missing that part, but the main plaza area out here on the, you know, the ski beach or the snow beach, whatever, where everybody goes to hang out. So there is a higher level of a much higher level of detail than we typically have. That said, you had a second part of your question that's really important. A specific plan is a policy document, and it includes zoning code, but you still have to implement it. And so that's where you have to undertake the project specific entitlements. So any development that would occur within this specific plan, what was originally approved included a large lot vesting tentative map that would divide up the land, but it was really just in blocks of areas. And so each project that would come forward was required to have what's called a small lot vesting tentative map, even if it's only for one lot that's already created, would have another map over the top of it, plus a use permit, a minor use permit or a conditional use permit. In any event, doesn't matter because it's all going to the planning commission at a minimum. And so then, of course, let's assume that we go through the conformity review. We determine that it meets all the requirements of the prior environmental analysis. It meets all the policy and code requirements of an approved plan. It could be approved. The intent and expectation of a specific plan is that you've already developed the recipe. Now you're baking the cake. If you bake the cake according to the recipe, it should be approved. To Vladimir's point, I think Vladimir asked a very astute question. This was a big issue for us in preparation of the environmental analysis. Is, you know, the plan is going to be, you know, if it was approved, it would be developing over a 30-year time frame, and we are in a very dynamic, changing environmental condition in the world, and the mitigation strategy for greenhouse gases was tied directly to the California Air Resources Board. I forget the name of the document, but basically that and the renewable portfolio strategy, the governor's executive orders ordering mandatory reduction of greenhouse gases across the state. It's tied to federal standards, and it evolves to the most current standard that is in place at the time whenever that phase of the project would be carried out. So it has to be in accordance with state and federal law. So it evolves and grows over time. And there are some similar things in the plan with other things like the air quality mitigation measures, always going to a higher level of mitigation, right? Because that's the trend. We have to get better. We have to become more efficient. We have to pollute less, use fewer resources. So those things are baked into the analysis. That was one area where the court did affirm we did that. I said one area. I mean, we got that part of it right, or at least that's the opinion. But so I think that you know, but Vladimir, you also raise a point of, you know, there was a broader question in there too. Those things, you know, how is the MAC going to consider those things? And that's the point of how does this fit within the community? Is it the right project? So those are the things under your consideration.
Thank you. Other questions? Tom, I know you had one.
My question is, well, what are we talking about? I feel like there's an elephant in the room that's been described as like a deep red section on a map. And I appreciate that there was that map put on the as part of the PowerPoint. And some of us have been involved in this process for the 10, 11 years. So we might have a better idea, but I would think a lot of people would end this evening and go home tonight going, what are we talking about? On the other end of the parking lot, there's the sign that says development proposal pending, Village at Palisades, Tahoe specific plan. And I know it doesn't really matter what I expect, but I expected to hear some specifics about what is filed with the county as a development proposal. Even if it was filed 11 years ago, I think it would be good to know what the heck are we talking about?
how do I pick it up from there? I was going to cover that, and I thank you for bringing that up, Tom, because it's very important. It's a good way to. Can you not hear me? Okay, how about now? So there is part of the county code that whenever we undertake a major project, we have to notify the public through a number of different means, and for anything that is jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, the project proponent is required to post these development proposal pending signs. So as Clayton mentioned earlier, while the writ was being, there was not the final disposition. We knew the appellate court's decision, but then they remand, and I probably get this a little bit wrong, but I think I'm good enough to handle this. They remanded it back to the Superior Court to enter the final judgment, which is the writ as I understand it. So the applicant engaged the county to undertake the technical corrections to the California Environmental Quality Act Environmental Impact Report Analysis. And that began last September. As we know now, the final writ determined that the county must revoke the approvals and decertify the EIR. So the Board of Supervisors is, I believe, scheduled to have a Tahoe hearing on October 24th and October 25th. We are tentatively scheduled for the October 25th date to come before the board and ask that the board rescind the project approvals and decertify the EIR. At that point, the project will be required to initiate a new application to the county. And so there will be a new application some point afterwards. Again, this is as long as I am, the applicant will be required to resubmit that application at that time.
This is Bob Barnett, and this comment is meant to be useful, so I hope you will take it in that manner. There's a disconnect between getting the EIR corrected as of 2011 and all of the concerns that we have that have happened in the last 11 years. Okay. I think there's a disconnect that is troubling, and that is that correcting the EIR back to the 2011 standard does not address the current problems that people are worried about. That includes our current knowledge of wildfire, which is concerning. Now we've got a fire burning towards us. We have the smoke in the valley again. The climate change that's affecting us. The local population growth and how that's changed. So instead of having empty houses, we've got people in them. Our worries about the adequacy of our water. And so I think from the county's point of view and the developer's point of view, it's really important to address the current problems, even if the EIR is legally corrected. And I think that's your challenge going forward.
I take the I think Bob is.
I think that's what I was trying to say too, Bob. I appreciate those comments. I think that in the context of today, that's ultimately when I'll be making a decision on it, is in the context of what we're facing today. So, and that is changes also to what we're doing in micromass transit and transportation systems. We've come a long way in really in the 6 years since the project was approved. So we need to look at all of that in context of what do we want to continue and what do we need to change.
Anybody else want to ask another question?
Alexis Aller for the record with Mountain Area Preservation. One of the big concerns that we had when reviewing the project, the previous project, was the deficiencies of workforce housing. And that particular issue has also been further exacerbated. Most of our workforce is not in our community. And so I really would encourage Palisade to not only do the requirement, the full requirement, because that was not fulfilled with the original application, but also go beyond the requirement, because that truly is being a good neighbor to the valley. So while it's not a question, it's me encouraging to do more than what's required, because this community deserves that.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Anybody else here?
We have one on Zoom. This is from Steve Bowowski, the president of the First Ascent HOA. We have seen our property insurance go from 58,000 in 2021 to over 976,000 in 2022. We have been told the increase is primarily due to wildfire potential. Obviously, the wildfire impact has changed over the years. How is current wildfire potential being addressed?
Good question. So one of our challenges on this project obviously is the setting. This is a box canyon. There is one road in, there is one road out. There was some exploration, for those that recall, of a potential loop road alternative that didn't work out. I think ultimately I don't want to speak on behalf of the Olympic Valley Fire Chief. So I'm going to be careful not to do that. But I will characterize what I understood from his predecessor, Chief Banson. A couple of things. The first off is if the project was approved under the conditions that it was previously approved, there is a requirement that the project dedicate land, design, fund, construct, staff, equip a fire station at the west end of the valley here. So there is some level of increased emergency response capability. And then my recollection of Chief Banson's characterization of the resort base area is that obviously these newer buildings, they are of a type of construction. They're not typically wood framed because of the size and scale of the buildings. They're built of more fire hardened materials. There's a lot of paved area, cleared area. There is a broader level of defensible space in the village setting itself. And that's why one of the strategies that exists now today, as I understand it, under the Olympic Valley Fire Department's current evacuation strategy, does include an option, at least for shelter in place, and that was incorporated into the project moving forward, along with a programmatic element that was developed for the specific plan, termed the Emergency Preparedness Evacuation Plan, that wasn't necessarily just an evacuation plan, emergency preparedness being a really important term, because it was a whole program of how the resort base area would be operated and messaged, and all of the component pieces that would be provided to staff that would have responsibilities, that would coordinate with the district, that would have information that would go into the hotel rental contracts and be posted in the rooms, things like that. So there is a fairly robust set of mitigations. I say fairly robust. I think it's incredibly robust under the circumstances, and we actually took a lesson from that in another project nearby in a neighboring community that was having a difficult time with that. We worked with the North Tahoe Fire Protection District on that project and incorporated the same concepts. And this was for a purely residential project, but it includes both the shelter in place facility for that community, and then it has a whole bunch of programming. And in that case, there's a repeater system that's tied into the NTFPD and radios in each of the homes and stuff. So, I think there are answers is what I'm getting at for, I know the fire issue is extremely scary. It scares me. And it's something that, moving forward, it realistically, we are going to have to continue to live with it, and we're going to have to get better at how we're dealing with it. And that's going to be an evolution of our understanding and relying on our fire planners and fire chiefs to guide us on those things. So certainly if anybody else wants to add on to that, I'd be happy to turn the mic over.
We have an additional follow-up online from that. Insurance companies require detailed procedures. Will detailed fire protection procedures be provided?
Yes, I mean, I think that I don't want to repeat what I just said, but yes, you know, these are these buildings, when they're above a certain height, they're built largely of concrete and steel. They're non-combustible materials. There are building code requirements that require certain types of closed assembly construction so that you don't have, you know, things where the fire sweeps through and ends up in the attic, because that's actually what, you know, happens in older homes a lot, or they actually just combust from the heat of the fire before it even reaches them if it's intense enough. But yeah, these things are all built into the project. And you know, I think as Clayton said earlier, one area that we've got to go back and address and reanalyze a little bit more detailed is the evacuation strategy. One thing that is very important to note is that the court did actually in their ruling say that the shelter in place is a valid strategy. And I think we're going to see more of that going forward. I've heard that from at least Chief Banson, as well as I forget the NTFPD chief's name that I was working with, but that's you know, something that fire chiefs are looking at as a realistic option for how to, you know, protect people and property. And obviously fuel modification being a very big part of that as well.
How are they helping existing buildings?
You know, that might be a little bit of a question for the developer, but the thing that I would refer to is, you know, there would be another fire department. So here in the west end of the valley, one of the things that we learned very early on in this process is that sometimes you have these rain on snow events, and they occur, you know, oftentimes in the spring, could occur at any time. We all know about the New Year's floods of, I think, 97, and Squaw Creek will overflow, actually, or had overflowed in the past, you know, the road down there. And that, you know, under that circumstance, if the Olympic Valley Fire Department is cut off from an emergency occurring down here, that's a major problem. And so that was something that was identified as there is a project specific need that is driven by the project to locate a West End fire station. That's how it would enhance protection of existing property here in the village. Jason, do you have something to add to that? Okay. Yeah.
No, I think, I really appreciate the public coming out tonight. I know there's a lot of gray area. This is, I think, and I need to ask county staff, but is this the first time we've gone through this sort of litigation, have this sort of reversal, and now we're trying to come back with a project? So we're learning as we go as well. We want to be transparent about that. That's why we're all here tonight. Repeat tomorrow night with the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council. I am sure all of these issues and maybe more will come out as well as questions and concerns from the community. And I think we're all open. I've gotten to know Dee very well in the last year or so since working with her through a number of issues. And I know she's open to listening. I'm open to listening, both from the county's perspective as the permitter of such a project, as well as the applicant in their role. And so I just really encourage us to try to make progress forward on what we need to address for the community, understanding the rights of the property owner, as well as the community's rights to have a role in that process. So I look forward to it. I know I'm a little weird in that I'm doing this job at this point in my life, but I do think when the public comes together, we get good solutions. So I don't think it needs a formalized process. David, you asked me that before. Can we do this formalized process? well, I know who would have to pick the people that would be engaged in that. And I'd go, how do I decide? So I want us all to be engaged in that. And I like those public processes and meeting with people. Many people from all over the county meet with me, pro and con, on projects all the time. And that's what I get paid to do, is meet with them all and try to find solutions.
You may have misunderstood. I think the question was to create a forum as opposed to pick specific people, an opportunity rather than just the MAC meeting to do that.
Well, I think the MAC meeting can take more public comment
Yeah.
than maybe you wanted to tonight for this first round, right? So if you'd prefer it not to be the MAC, there's design review committee, as you know, there's a number of committees, but we can do town halls. That's, I've been trying to go to more town hall meetings too, so we can do that as well. And I think we're coming away. I know I have more questions to ask staff after this meeting, maybe than even came up at the meeting, to make sure I'm clear on how this moves forward.
So I'm going to take a prerogative and make sure that I understand what I've heard, and maybe to clarify some things. On the Board of Directors meeting, Board of Supervisors meeting that's going to be held next month, the approvals will be rescinded. Okay, that mean, in my mind, or at least what I've heard tonight, is a new application will be created. And that new application will basically start the process all over again. Now, the specific plan may or may not change, but that would be the specific plan will be the basis of the project, and we'll go back to the meetings that we had that review that. Is that correct? So
Yes.
okay. The environmental impact report is basically a activity that is funded by the developer in the county or something like that.
Funded only by the developer.
Developer.
They pay the full costs of the consultant and the county staff time.
But I guess my point is, again, from what I've heard, what it will contain is basically up to the consultants and the developer in terms of what it will say.
No, that is not, no.
Okay.
No, the environmental impact report is an empirical analysis, if you will. It is based on facts and data and legal standards of adequacy and things like that, right? So it is a highly technical analysis of the project effects and disclosure of its impacts, identification of mitigation measures, hopefully to reduce all impacts to a less than significant level. We did identify previously mitigation measures for all impacts. There was not a capability to, usually oftentimes on a large project, to reduce impacts to a clearly less than significant level. So you determine there may be a residual level of significance, or that there is. Clayton covered that earlier, but yeah.
But most of the questions that were raised tonight seem to revolve around, will the basis of the environmental impact report in terms of environmental conditions be ones of 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever it was years ago? Or will every section of it where an environmental condition has changed be redone?
Yeah, and again, that's that becomes fairly technical. And if Clayton is still online, I can always request his assistance. Clayton?
Yeah, happy to join in. So I think the easiest way to look at it is the EIR and the project from 2016. That's where we're starting as a base. So that EIR is based off that project that was approved by the county in 2016. So we will go and modify the environmental analysis in accordance with the Court of Appeal, but we will start this process from that project that was approved and figure out if in fact tweaks, edits are needed to that project that was approved originally. And I think it's important to note there was a lot of analysis, a lot of work that went into that EIR that ultimately was approved in 2016. So while some of that information in it may no longer be valid, there likely is a lot of information in there that still is valid and accurate that we'll be using for purposes of moving forward with the project. So the EIR itself is something that will be based off that base project, but as we go through this process over the next few months, we'll be figuring out if in fact edits are needed, and also similarly, if that means that there would be tweaks to the EIR because of those edits.
Thanks. So I guess there's one other point I'd want to make, and it refers back to something that Cindy said in the very beginning, which people may or may not have picked up on. So if we relive history, there'll be a lot of people who will object to what the EIR actually basically says, or the mitigations that it puts out. And the ultimate arbiter of whether it's adequate or not, at least within our realm, is the Board of Supervisors. So they will get to rule on whether the EIR is adequate or not. That's correct.
Yes.
Okay. So if you think about the Board of Supervisors come a year from now, let's say, 4 of the 5 people on the Board of Supervisors will have never heard this project at all. There's perhaps only one, Supervisor Holmes, right? Will be the only person who heard this project before. So the challenge, if you're an opponent of the project or want to make a point about the EIR, histrionics is not going to sway anybody's decision. It's going to be, as Alex has said, facts. So there's a whole new group of people to be persuaded. There's a whole new group of people to evaluate the project and the environmental impact report. And I think the challenge that both the proponents and the opponents of the project have is to bring to the Board of Supervisors factual information in terms of, is the environmental impact report as presented at that time representative of what the environment actually is? All right. And their job will be to evaluate whether that is true or not true. But remember that it's a different group of people that are going to be hearing this. And so that represents an opportunity to bring everybody's best game forward, both in terms of the proponents and the mitigations that they bring in terms of the environmental impacts, and the opponents who say that's not adequate and here's why. All right, let's keep that in mind. This is a different group of people that are hearing this.
And to follow up with that, also our planning commission has changed pretty dramatically. So you have two new bodies hearing this process, as well as MAC members have changed. So, yeah. So I appreciate that, David.
I'd like to respond to you. And that is, Board of Supervisors. We cannot expect that they will be experts in every single aspect of the So, what would you do if you were asked to decide something that you know nothing about? What would you do?
Whether you like it or not, they are the ones that say.
No, but you would, come on, I know that you would ask somebody who knows. You would ask their opinion and assessment from somebody who knows, okay? And that's what's going to happen here, okay?
All right. Whoops, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank everybody's patience for sitting through this. I thank the county staff for coming and answering all the questions. And thank you guys. Back to the agenda items. Wait.